If you sleep 7 to 8 hours every day but still wake up tired, feel as if you have not slept at all, and constantly feel exhausted while going to school, working, or commuting, the issue may not be just a heavy workload. Because some of the fatigue we feel may be caused by sleep deprivation, some by anemia, some by thyroid problems, and some by unnoticed sleep disorders. Sometimes we may even be confusing ordinary fatigue with chronic fatigue syndrome. In this video, we will look together at the most commonly confused causes of fatigue, the warning signs that should be taken seriously, and the widely circulated claims on the internet that have weak support. Let's begin. When we say chronic fatigue, some people may mean an unexplained drop in energy lasting for weeks, while others may mean a more specific condition called myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome. It is important not to confuse these two. First, let us examine conditions other than myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome. One of the most common and seemingly ordinary yet most underestimated causes of chronic fatigue is sleep. I can almost hear you saying, "I stay in bed for 8 hours at night, but I still wake up feeling like I've been hit by a truck." So why is simply sleeping 7 to 8 hours not enough? Another issue that is just as important as sleep duration is sleep quality. In other words, not only how many hours you spend in bed matters, but also whether your sleep is fragmented. If sleep is fragmented, the biological rhythm is disrupted. The brain and body cannot fully recover overnight. Attention, reaction time, hormonal balance, and energy regulation systems are affected. Especially if there is snoring, episodes where breathing seems to stop at night, morning headaches, and excessive daytime sleepiness, sleep disorders such as sleep apnea may come into consideration. In sleep apnea, breathing repeatedly becomes impaired throughout the night. This disrupts the continuity of sleep and can cause excessive daytime fatigue. As a result, even if a person gets out of bed in the morning, they do not feel rested. During the day, they may experience brain fog, weakness, and reduced performance. The important point here is this: saying, "I sleep a long time so my problem cannot be sleep," can be misleading. Duration and quality are not the same thing. Therefore, especially in fatigue lasting for weeks, not only the sleep schedule, but also whether sleep is being interrupted should be monitored. But sometimes the problem is not the night, but the way the body carries energy during the day. Fatigue does not always mean energy production in the body is impaired. Sometimes the real issue may be inadequate oxygen transport, hormonal imbalance, or systemic burden. In anemia, the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood decreases. When it is more pronounced, it can cause severe fatigue, dizziness, and shortness of breath. In hypothyroidism, the metabolism may slow down because the thyroid gland cannot produce enough hormones. Additionally, it may cause feeling cold, weight gain, dry skin, and muscle joint pain. Sometimes it may also appear together with depressive feelings. The active ingredients in some medications we use may suppress the nervous system. Antihistamines, some painkillers, some antidepressants, or a cycle of heavy alcohol and caffeine consumption may both keep a person from sleeping properly and make them feel tired during the day. In such situations, the body's system works under greater strain or some processes slow down. As a result, we may feel symptoms such as weakness, getting tired quickly, feeling cold, shortness of breath, and difficulty concentrating. The important point here is this: a decision is not made based on a single symptom. The cluster of symptoms is important for diagnosis. Chronic fatigue is not only related to the muscles, it is also closely associated with changes in attention, motivation, and mood. Long-lasting stress or depressive symptoms can trigger sleep disturbances, loss of appetite, and difficulty concentrating. Therefore, in some people, physical low energy and mental burnout may be confused with each other. So does this mean that the main cause of chronic fatigue is just psychological? No. A more accurate statement is this: mind and body are parts of the same system. The fatigue seen in depression or long-term stress is real, but it is not a weakness of personality. Likewise, it is also incorrect to generalize that the main cause of every fatigue is suppressed stress. Although such explanations may sound explanatory, they are often overly simplistic. Myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, ME/CF, is a more specific clinical condition than ordinary fatigue. People with this syndrome have a marked reduction in daily functioning, unrefreshing sleep, cognitive complaints, and worsening after exertion. This last point is very important because in some people, after physical or mental effort, the symptoms may be experienced not merely as tiredness, but as a crash lasting for hours or even days. So why is worsening after exertion so distinctive? Because the issue here is not merely reduced coordination. When a person exceeds their physical or mental limits, symptoms can flare up intensely and recovery may take longer than expected. This can seriously make daily life more difficult for the person. Another important point to note here is this: there is no single confirmatory laboratory test for people with chronic fatigue syndrome. Diagnosis is made based on the patient's history, physical examination, appropriate tests, and the exclusion of other conditions that can cause similar fatigue. So the claims on the internet saying chronic fatigue can be understood with a single test are not scientifically strong. Being tired from time to time is normal. If low energy lasts for weeks, does not improve despite rest, or significantly disrupts daily functioning, it should be taken seriously, especially if it is accompanied by signs like unintentional weight loss, fever, night sweats, shortness of breath, significant snoring and daytime sleepiness, intolerance to cold, heavy menstrual bleeding, marked low mood, chest pain, or fainting. The situation may be more important. At this point, the safest approach is not to try to diagnose yourself on the internet, but to notice the pattern formed by the symptoms. In other words, the following questions are more valuable. How long has this been going on? Does it improve with sleep? Is there a clear worsening after exertion? Are snoring or pauses in breathing being described? Are weight, menstrual cycle, medications, mood, or a history of infection part of the picture? In medicine, the correct diagnosis is often reached not by a single symptom, but by the pattern created by symptoms. If the answer to several of these questions is yes for you, I recommend consulting a specialist. The first misconception is this: chronic fatigue equals vitamin deficiency. Yes, deficiencies of some vitamins may be associated with fatigue in the body, but reducing persistent fatigue to a single vitamin or a single food is often an exaggeration. Fatigue is a symptom with many possible causes. Another commonly confused idea is that if the tests are normal, there is no problem. This is not a correct approach either. Especially conditions such as sleep disorders, depression, stress burden, or chronic fatigue syndrome may not be explained by simple blood tests. On the other hand, there is no strong and standard accepted evidence for claims such as the cause of fatigue is hidden toxins and the intestines need cleansing. The third misconception is the idea we often see on social media called adrenal fatigue, which claims that chronic stress causes the adrenal glands to overwork and produce insufficient cortisol. It is not a standard accepted diagnosis framework in mainstream medical guidelines. Therefore, even though it may sound explanatory, it may cause us to overlook the real causes of chronic fatigue. The most reliable approach in this area is to return to established methods of evaluation rather than popular influences, and to consult a specialist. To summarize the topic, chronic fatigue is not a simple condition that can be attributed to a single cause. Sometimes the problem really is insufficient or poor quality sleep, sometimes anemia, sometimes thyroid problems, sometimes the effects of the medications we use or psychological burdens. Sometimes what we think is ordinary fatigue may actually be part of a different pattern that requires more careful evaluation. Therefore, what is important is not just saying, "I feel tired," but noticing which symptoms come along with this fatigue. Chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME/CF, stands in a separate place here in particular, because what distinguishes this syndrome from ordinary fatigue is not only that it lasts a long time, but also that it involves symptoms such as clear worsening after exertion, not fully recovering with rest, and serious decline in daily functioning. The quick explanations or miraculous solutions circulating on the internet may sound appealing, but scientifically, the safest approach is not to chase popular labels, but to take seriously the pattern formed by the symptoms. Because the right question is often not, "What will make me feel energized immediately?" The more accurate question is this: which cause or which cluster of symptoms could this fatigue be a part of? So together, with which situations does this fatigue appear most often in you? Poor sleep, intense stress, an irregular lifestyle, or other symptoms that are difficult for you to explain? Write in the comments. Let's look at it together. For scientific but understandable health videos, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. See you in the next video. I wish you healthy days.